Hi folks, my name is Ben and welcome back to the channel. Because it is a very special and magical time of year, I actually have a gift for you all. I have a gift for Gitmas. This is going to be a really quick talk containing a bunch of juicy knowledge nuggets about Git for you to indulge on this holiday season and for you to hopefully take away and learn from. Before I dive in, you're going to see a bunch of Git commands. They're going to look like this in this black box with the green text. Most of these commands in this presentation can be copied and pasted directly into your Git terminal workflow. And the reason that I'm showing you Git commands as opposed to Git in the GUI is because of the unlimited power that it gives to you. Git was supposed to be used like this. Git commands were supposed to be used in the terminal as opposed to a GUI. However, if you do use a GUI, that's absolutely fine, and hopefully some of the concepts that I'll teach you about in this video will still apply to you in the GUI, except you might have more abstractions and different buttons to click, as opposed to using the commands as they should be used. So, I've got a couple of gifts for you under the tree, but before I dive in, I want to say that as of right now, as I'm filming this video, all of the things that you see in this presentation will be available as a cheat sheet on this URL. And again, the URL will be in the description down below and you'll see it again later in the video. So you don't need to worry about jotting things down. The cheat sheet hopefully will be really useful. The three gifts that I have for you, let's start unwrapping them. The first gift I have for you is a delicious Git config. The second gift I have for you is a warm and bushy Git Stash. And finally, the last gift is actually a guest. It is the ghost of Gitmas past. Let's dive in. Let's start with the juicy git config. Git config is a command that lets you see and change your Git settings. So perhaps I have a bunch of different Git configurations to you to make my Git experience entirely different. There are loads and loads of Git settings and configurations out there. I'll let you discover most of them on your own, and you can see there's a link on this slide and in the description down below where you can learn more about that. To set a new Git setting, you use the command git config with some parameters. The first one, where. We're actually going to come back to the where in just a second, so bear with me. Then you need to say what setting you are setting, the name of the setting, and of course the value that you are attaching to that setting. For example, you might recognize this line, git config user email blah. This is you telling Git who you are, more specifically what your email is for commits and so on. And you can see how that command maps to our sort of template. I'm going to give you a couple of tasty treats immediately, just to keep you interested and entertained. The first tasty treat I want to give you, and again, all of these can be copied and pasted directly as they are, and they should work. The git config color setting. By default, Git, when it outputs information in the terminal, just uses a single standard color of whatever your color output is. If you use this setting, the color UI setting, then it will colorize its output, making it far easier to read, understand which bits are different from what, and to digest and understand. The next bit is this, and actually I think this is a setting that's available in Git 2.28 and upwards, but don't quote me on that. This setting, because the industry is starting to move away from the master branch naming convention because it's not particularly inclusive, this setting lets you, whenever you use the git init command to initialize a new repository, lets you define the name of the default branch. No more master, instead possibly main. And the final one is a bit quirky. Whenever you mistype a git command, for example, git adv instead of git add, Git, if it can figure out what you were trying to go for, in this case after 2 seconds, will automatically put in the correct command and trigger it for you. Nifty. So let's go back to that where thing I was talking about before. Git actually has different configuration levels, and not many people know about this. You can put Git settings in different areas. What do I mean? So Git actually has a system-wide configuration, so for every user on that machine. Git has a user-wide configuration, so for every repository of that user. And of course, Git has individual repository settings. And you can tell Git where you want a setting to go to in this sort of scoped hierarchy by adding one of these flags, --system, --global, or --local, depending on where you want it to save it to. Git reads these settings top to bottom when it's trying to build your sort of summarized config for that repo, what your summarized configs from collating all of them together, top to bottom, and any conflicting settings it finds, it overwrites with the newer ones. So that means that a repo level config has a higher priority than a system and user-based config, for example. Nice. Here's the thing, you can always list out your Git configuration to find out what your actual summarized config is. Git config -- list. But one better, if you do git config list -- show origin, not only does it give you your config list, but it tells you where each line came from which level of the configuration it originated. Powerful. Also, these different config levels actually map to a file in your file system. So for example, the system level configuration maps to /etc/git-config. So if you wanted to, instead of doing git config command line commands, you can actually go into the files and manually edit them, and it has the same effect. Git, when it's trying to understand your config, is simply reading and writing to those files. So for example, on the right, you can see here a very quick example of my local user git config file. Don't worry about reading it or understanding it, just know that it is a file, and it contains all of the configs, and I can go in and change it manually if I wanted to. So now let's switch just a little bit, still in the juicy git config area, but we want to talk about aliases. Aliases, hopefully, are as they say on the tin. They are shorthand versions of commands. They are nickname for commands, so you don't need to type huge long commands, you can type shorter versions. Here is how you set up a git alias. You do git config wherever you want it, global in this case, alias dot and the name that you want to call to trigger this alias. So in this case, all. And then in quotes, the git command that you actually want to trigger. So in this case, I'm doing git branch -a, and this alias is the same as me doing this, git branch -a, but instead of writing all that, I can now type in git space all, because I called that alias all. So that's really powerful. And here is just a really quick list of some aliases that I might recommend to you. Instead of git checkout, you could do git co. Instead of git branch, you could do git br, etc. But that's not the only thing. You don't just have to make git aliases do git commands. You can make git aliases do external shell bash commands if you like. All you have to do differently is add an exclamation mark at the start of the command, and then Git goes, oh wait, that's an external command. And here, as a little gift from me to you, is one of my favorite git aliases that's triggering an external command. It's called git crap. And this happens when I'm working on a branch. I realize halfway through all of my changes, crap, I should have been working on a different branch entirely. So I do git space crap with the new branch name that I want, and this alias triggers. And behind the scenes, hopefully you can see the code yourself, it stashes away those changes, makes a new branch for me, and brings those stashes right back, all by simply typing git crap and new branch I was supposed to be working on. Right, we've talked a little bit about a juicy git config. Let's talk about Git Stash. Git Stash is a really powerful command that not many people that I've spoken to use. Git Stash lets you sweep away or shuffle away all of your dirty changes that have yet to be staged or committed into a sort of holding cell. They're not gone, they're not deleted, they're just out of sight, they're out of the way, nicely stored for you, and you can call back to them whenever you want to. Here's something. When you do Git Stash, it obviously shuffles those things away, but it does not include by default untracked files. And an untracked file is, for example, a file that the Git system doesn't know about yet. So maybe something that hasn't been added in the past. It's a brand new file. Maybe you've made a brand new file. So what I always do is Git Stash with the -u flag to include untracked files. And in fact, on my machine, I alias Git Stash to be Git Stash U all the time, because I always want to make sure my untracked files are stashed whenever I'm doing stashes. Nice. Here's one thing, if you're working with multiple stashes, you can do that, of course you can Git Stash all over the place. You can do Git Stash list to list out your stashes, and you can see an example output here. They each have like a numbered index and a strange message next to them. And what you can do by default, whenever you apply a stash or bring it back or destroy a stash, Git always assumes that you mean the first one, the one at the 0 index. But what if you didn't mean the first one? What if you wanted to work with a specific stash? Well, you can do that. You can do Git Stash and whatever you want to do, apply, show, drop, all by using this strange syntax, stash at curly braces and inside the number of the stash that you want to work with. So git stash apply 1, and I would work with this second in this list stash right there. Nice. And the other thing that's even more powerful is these commit messages, right? These stash messages, if you don't tell Git, they auto-generate for you. So it's always whip working in progress on whatever branch you were working on, followed by the most recent commit message on that branch. But with an additional keyword, the save keyword, you can give your own custom stash messages. So no longer is it this auto-generated maybe nonsense. You can have whatever you like. I broke something. I was in the middle of something else. Blah, blah, blah. Git stash save your message. And of course, right in the bottom of the slide here, the -u flag. I'm trying to make you think about that untracked file all the time. Just git stash save -u and your message, and you've got it all in one command. Now, my favorite bit here, Gitmas past, the ghost of Gitmas past. This is talking about git undo, if you like, not a real git command. A lot of people talk about Git being a version control system and the ability to, if you make a mistake, go back in time, undo it, get rid of it. But not a lot of people actually know how to do the undoing, and if they do, they don't know all of the options available to them. So let me tell you the 3 options that are available. 1, the just visiting option. This is where you go back in time just to have a little look, and when you're ready, you jump back to the future. Option 2, this is do the invert of something. Let's say you had some changes. You want to say, I didn't like that. Let me do the invert of that. And option 3 is what I call scrap that crap. This is the dangerous one we'll talk about in a little bit. It moves you back in time and does something to the changes that you just skipped past. Something. We'll talk about it in a second. Here we go with some diagrams and visuals. This is the just visiting option, back to the top. We're going to use the git checkout command. And that's the same command that we do use to check out branches. But instead, we're going to point it at a specific commit hash, a specific commit. So git checkout, in this case, commit F, if you can see this commit diagram. So git checkout commit F, it detaches our head. We point at git commit F, how it was in that time, but commit G is still right there. It's just in the future. When we're ready to go back to the future, we just use git checkout and the name of the branch, and it will pop us right back to the top, back to G in this case. The do the opposite option uses the command git revert, and this is really powerful. If I want to, for example, revert, so undo the changes in commit F, right? But I don't want to change the commit history here. I want us to keep it like that. What I can do is git revert with a specific commit, commit F, and it looks at that commit and mirror images. It flips it. So if git commit F added a line, then what it does is deletes a line, and it flips it. And it does something like this. It adds a new commit onto the end of our stack with the mirror image of the one that we reverted. Powerful. Now, my favorite one, and this comes in 3 modes, so we'll talk about this. The scrap that crap version, the git reset version, and this can be dangerous depending on the mode, so let's talk about it. Git reset goes back in time and also does something to the changes that it just sort of made future changes, if you like, the changes that came after the commit it's gone to, depending on the mode. The first mode, soft, it has soft, mixed, and hard. If we look at soft, what it does is it goes back in time and it takes those changes, you saw those G changes, and it puts them in the staging area. The staging area is the place that Git has things after you have used the command git add. So when you git add changes, it puts them in the staging area. So soft puts them back in the staging area and puts you back in time. The mixed version, which is the default if you do not declare which mode you're using, it's mixed, does the similar thing, goes back in time, but takes the changes that preceded that commit and puts them in the working directory. That's the place where all of your changes are as you're working on them before you use the git add command. And if you hadn't already guessed it, the final one is -- hard. This is the dangerous one. It takes the commit, it goes back in time and takes all other commits after that commit and throws them away, destroys them, bins them, gets rid of them, wipes them from existence. That's the -- hard version, and that is the dangerous, possibly dangerous one if you're not comfortable with it. So it goes back in time to the commit that you specify, and all the other changes that came after it, gonzo. And that has been it. Just a really quick fast-paced gift from me to you for Gitmas. And again, I just want to say the cheat sheet will be available hopefully on that bit.ly link still if you're still watching it. I'll put it in the comments down below. And with that, all I want to do is say, Merry Gitmas, everyone. Git bless us, everyone.